Good morning, everyone. If I could have a soundtrack with the Sunday service, which I can't for copyright reasons, I'd have to pay a large fee to ASCAP or BMI for streaming music. But today's song would be "Me and My Shadow." I know most of you must have heard it along the way. It was first recorded in 1927 by Al Jolson, but I think everybody who's ever ever been a popular singer through the years has made a recording of "Me and My Shadow." It appeared in some Broadway musicals, and Maurice Chevalier had a big hit with it in 1968. Frank Sinatra sang it. Sammy Davis Jr. sang it. I think they sang a duet of it. But you have this image, the first image we want to start with is the shadow being with us, the shadow staying with us, the shadow following us around and mimicking our moves. And I know I've mentioned this before, but it's such a good illustration. If you watch the videos shows on TV where they show the YouTube videos and the funny videos, they always have some of little children who are startled when they discover their shadow. They're out on the playground somewhere, and usually some mean-spirited older kid says, "Oh, look, somebody's following you. What is that thing? Oh my God, it's going to get you," And the little one kind of goes into a panic mode, and he or she starts running, trying to get away from the shadow. And of course, the faster they run, the faster the shadow runs with them. And of course, mommy or whoever's taking care of them tries to comfort them and tell them it's okay, but it doesn't do them any good because the shadow is still there. And I was watching this one time, and there was a man from India with a little child, and this happened. And I was just so fascinated by what he did, Instead of just telling the child, "Well, don't worry, it's okay, it's only your shadow." Those are intellectual concepts that don't do us any good when we're afraid, particularly if we're little and we're afraid. And just remember that, the intellect is of no use when the emotion is involved, or little use, let me put it that way. And that's why, so many times people try to frighten us, or to take advantage of us. The scammers, the thing on the big scam now is they call you up and tell you that they've kidnapped your child or something like that, and if you don't send them a Western Union MoneyGram, they'll do harm. And of course, once your fear gets aroused, the ability to stop and say, "Wait a minute, my kid is next door. What are they talking about?" But at any rate, this little Indian child, became startled by his shadow. And the man that was with him, I don't know whether it was his grandfather, was an older man, was with him, had him face the shadow. They faced the shadow together, and he pointed to his own shadow, the man's shadow, and he reached his hand up over the top of his head, and he grabbed the top of his head. So that what happened is the shadow hand, grabbed the head of the shadow, and he told the child, "Now you go ahead and do that." And the little child was kind of scared, but he reached up his little hand and he put it on top of his head. And the man said, "See, now you're in control of that shadow. You have it. You caught it. It can't hurt you." What's important here is once that child felt in control, he was no longer bothered or afraid of the shadow. Right? So just the other parents telling the children, "Oh, honey, don't worry about it. It's only a shadow. Everybody has one," didn't make it any better. It didn't make the kids feel any better. They were still terrified that this thing was following them around. But once that little one put its hand up and grabbed the top of its head and saw the shadow do the same, he realized he could control the shadow and he was no longer afraid. Now, what in the world does that have to do with metaphysics? Well, we all have a mental shadow. We all have our mental atmosphere. We want to start by thinking about, what are we really? What are you and I really? Are we these bodies, or are these bodies just something that we experience as we go through life here on this earth? And what is it that is experiencing this body? And we come down to, there is a conscious awareness, a consciousness. that experiences this world through this body. Not entirely, but the part that experiences the world not necessarily through the five physical senses. It's a part we haven't quite developed yet. We experience it from time to time. We have flashes of it. Most people do in one way or another. You know, premonitions, understanding other people's thoughts, things like that, you know, that they occur and there's no way to explain them through the physical senses. The mystical experiences. We kind of have these little glimpses that the life that we are is more than the life that we know as the body. And we are this thing called consciousness. If we think of what theologians tell us about this thing we call God, you know, the first thing they tell us is God is spirit. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean, God is spirit? God is consciousness aware of itself, and it is a consciousness that does not require a specific form to be aware of itself. So we have to be careful with the way we say this, because consciousness is always cloaking itself in form, but it is the consciousness that cloaks itself in form. It is a consciousness that is not dependent upon the form. It is pure consciousness aware of itself. Pure consciousness aware of itself. And you and I, we can experience that through our spiritual practice, through our meditations. There are specific meditations that we could, if anybody's interested, it's called the blue light consciousness. And it is a way that we can become conscious of consciousness. Now, most of our meditations, we are conscious of something else, conscious of a candle, conscious of a plant, conscious of observing our thoughts. You know, so most of our meditations are kind of an awareness of something else. But the blue light consciousness is a conscious awareness of consciousness. It is consciousness being aware of itself. Now, it's not the kind of thing that you can sit down and in 5 minutes do. You may be able to if you really believed it, but it is something to work toward in our spiritual practice. A great deal of our spiritual practice then is involved in becoming aware of our consciousness through meditation and directing our consciousness through affirmative prayer. So we are this consciousness is what we are. The essence of what we are is consciousness, and consciousness is our awareness. And there are many things that we are aware of. There are many things that we believe, and some of those we are aware of at the conscious level. That is, we are aware that we are aware of them, and some of those we are aware of below the conscious level. That is, our conscious mind is not aware that what we call our subconscious or subliminal mind, it believes that. It sounds a little confusing, so I'll just try to clear it up. There's things that we know, and we know that we know, and there's things that part of us knows, and the other part doesn't know that we know it. And so it's really a strange experience we're having here, because it's like there's two of us, and yet there's only one. And I'll give you an example. You know, did you ever forget something that you know, and then a little while later you remember it? Well, where was that knowledge when you couldn't remember it? Was the knowledge gone, and then suddenly you conjured it up? Or was that knowledge kind of filed away somewhere in a part of your consciousness that you couldn't quite access at the moment? And then suddenly you were able to come back to it. So there are things that we know, but we can't consciously access that knowledge all the time. And this is what, if you read the books on self-hypnosis and things like that, this is what they call our subconscious mind. The subconscious mind records everything that ever happened to it. It's all there, and through through proper techniques, working with a hypnotherapist, we can go back and remember them. That's kind of the theory that you get. But for now, the point that I want to make and the point that I want to remember is that you and I are, in essence, this mental atmosphere. This mental atmosphere. That's what we are. Now, sometimes Dr. Holmes would talk about, sometimes when he was speaking, people would come to him afterwards and say, "Oh, Dr. Holmes, I saw your aura today," or your A-U-R-A, aura, while you were speaking today. And I've had that as well, being a public speaker, particularly in a church environment. People will tell you that they can see your aura as you're speaking. I've seen it a time or two myself, not my own, but other speakers when I was in church and I watched them speak. And Dr. Holmes would say, people would come up and say, "I saw your aura today, and I saw Emerson. I saw Emerson was in your aura, and he was smiling down upon you." And Dr. Holmes would say, well, it's very possible that they did, because the thoughts of Emerson are a big part of Dr. Holmes' consciousness, a big part of what he believes. Emerson was a great influence on his thought. He says, and it's no mystery that people might interpret that and see that as an image of Emerson. Not that Emerson himself was actually really there, the ghost of Emerson, but they tuned into something. They tuned into something in his mental atmosphere that they recognized as Emerson. So we have this mental atmosphere which is like our shadow, and like the child on the playground, we can't outrun it. We can't outrun it. No matter where you go, there you are. You can't outrun your consciousness. Now you couple that with this idea that there is a power in the universe that responds to us according to our belief. You can call it the law of attraction, you can call it the law of mind, you can call it the law of correspondence. It's called by many things. Basically what we're saying is, it's done unto you according to your belief. Cast your bread upon the waters, and they shall return unto you. That's New Testament. Old Testament, Isaiah said, "My word shall not return unto me void." Buddhism says everything that you have experienced is a result of what you have thought. Florence Scovel Shinn says life's a game of boomerangs. What you toss out, you're going to get back. We start to develop this awareness as we grow and as we mature. We start to develop this awareness that our attitude towards life actually affects our circumstances in life. If people are happy, if they are optimistic, if they are always looking for and expecting the best and seeing the best in everything, they tend to have that experience. If people are pessimistic and negative and sarcastic, and they are always looking for the worst, expecting the worst in everyone, well, they tend to have that experience. You know for yourselves, if you look back, reflect back on your life and reflect on other people. It's always easier to reflect on other people than it is to look in the mirror and reflect on ourselves. So sometimes we do that before we can go look at ourselves. But you know people who have had a terrible time on a job, and they finally decided that they needed to quit that job and go get another. And within a short time, a couple of years maybe, the circumstances at the new job looked very much like the circumstances on the old job. They had recreated that experience, even though they physically picked up and moved to another city maybe. All of the boss and the co-workers all have different names and faces than the ones in the old city. The personalities all started to look very much the same. People do that in relationships, you know. They're in a relationship, and and of course, when the relationship doesn't work, what people do is the normal, natural thing. They say, well, the other person's wrong. The other person's broken. You know, it's all their fault, and I need to free myself from this and go start all over again. And they do, and then in a few years' time, the new relationship looks very much like the old relationship. See, we keep recreating. It's like when I was talking about the movie Groundhog Day. We keep recreating over and over and over the same circumstances in our lives. And the reason we do that is there is a power that responds to us according to our belief. And it is producing the circumstances in our lives according to the sum total of what we believe. And if we haven't changed our belief, it doesn't matter where we go. We're like the child on the playground. We're trying to run away from our shadow, and we can't. We can't get away from our shadow. Now, we can try to ignore that, like the parents on the playground who just tell the kid, well, look over this way, and have them look towards the sunlight, not into the sun, but turn their back to their shadow. And the shadow disappears. The child can't see it because they're looking the other direction. But that hasn't changed the fact that the shadow's still there. What has changed the fact is the child's not paying attention to it any longer. That works okay. That may work okay on the playground. But in our lives, because there's a power responding to us according to our belief, it doesn't matter which way we turn. It doesn't matter whether we're paying attention to it or not. The circumstances are still outpicturing. What we have to do is we have to learn to do what the Indian man taught the little child, and that is to take control, right? To remember, keep that image in your mind of that little child looking at the shadow and placing its hand on the top of its head so that the shadow hand grabbed and controlled the shadow self. The only way we are to make meaningful change in our lives is to learn how to consciously control. Deliberately control is perhaps a better word. Deliberately control our consciousness. And the importance of that is that the consciousness is what remains. The consciousness is what continues. So, pay me now or pay me later. We have to do it, and we have to do it at some point in our lives. Now, it only makes sense that if everything that's going on in our life is an outpicturing of our consciousness, it only makes sense if we want a different experience that we must change our consciousness. And it only makes sense that we, even if we're just completely satisfied with the way everything is just completely wonderful, that since what we are in our essence is consciousness, that we should become more aware of what that consciousness is. Right? The oracle over the temple at Delphi said, know thyself. What are we? We are consciousness. What do we know about consciousness? What do we know about that thing, part of consciousness that we call us? We as human beings have that ability. We have that ability to be self-aware or to exercise self-awareness. We have that ability to think about what we're thinking about. And because we have the ability, we have the responsibility to do so. So let's think about this thing called consciousness and how it forms and what we can do to kind of, I won't say work with it, perhaps play with it is a better word, to get in there and just kind of really explore and discover what is this fascinating stuff called consciousness. So I was sharing some ideas with someone a few days ago. We were talking about the process of change, how do people become the way they are, what tactics do they use to stay the way they are, and then eventually how do they change. And this was, in regard to something the person was going through that they were exploring for some research they were doing. So I want you to think of us as human beings kind of coming into the world. Think of the baby. The picture just came to me. I was in a grocery store yesterday, and there was this beautiful baby there. Probably, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 months old. Could barely sit up in the grocery cart, And of course, mommy was pushing her around and giving her love, and the little one was just so content. She was just so content with her mommy, just eyes wide open, looking around at all the people, looking at all the colors and everything. And you think of that consciousness, think of that consciousness when we first come into this experience. Whatever we knew before we got here is somewhere buried down, hard for us to access. But when we come into this world, we are kind of little sponges, we're kind of looking around, observing everything. And what the intellect is doing, it is forming an opinion about things and the way they are and the way that things ought to be. And I call it mental map making, that we are lean, mean map making machines. We look at things, we kind of label them, we judge them, we put them into a pigeonhole, and we think we know everything that we need to know about them at the time, so we just kind of file that away somewhere. And you can understand from the point of view of evolution, the point of view of human beings learning to live in this environment, that there was a point in our evolution where that was very important. Right? So our minds, the way that our minds kind of function in this environment is we look for patterns of things. Our minds kind of put together patterns, and we kind of look for things, and we look how they operate in patterns. And then we don't have to devote a whole lot of attention to the particular thing every time it comes up. We can just kind of get a glimpse of it, and if it fits the pattern that we expect from it, we don't have to give it more attention. This freed our mind up. This is Jim Young's view of evolution. It freed our mind up to learn new things, right? So we kind of learn new things, and then something off here on our peripheral vision doesn't fit the pattern anymore, and now it gets our attention. So you can imagine that we are walking through the forest tens of thousands of years ago, and we have a pattern of the way the trees look, and we have a pattern of the way the leaves flutter in the wind. We have this image that we have previously developed and filed in the back of our mind, and all of a sudden something changes. There's a movement in the brush. Now it has our attention, right? So now we are alerted to a potential danger. Maybe there's a wild creature there that we need to prepare to defend ourselves against. My point is that labeling things, putting them in pigeonholes, and then just assuming that what we put in the pigeonhole is accurate, served its purpose as we were going through life. But it also serves to limit us as we are going through life, because we have all of these things that we have labeled, we have analyzed, we have stored away. We have all of these beliefs that we have formed. And the part of our mind that was making these stories up and filing these stories away about this is the way things are, and this is the way things should be, it really didn't care whether our opinion was true or false, as long as we stayed alive. Right? The ego's main goal was to keep us alive. So we may have looked at something and formed an opinion of something, and it was a totally false opinion, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter to the ego, as long as it kept the pattern didn't change. But now we have reached a point in evolution, as Thomas Troward tells us, we have kind of reached the fifth level, the fifth dimension. Right? I think of Billy Davis Jr. and Marilyn McCoo, the fifth dimension. We have evolved, or life has evolved on this planet. It has evolved through the mineral. It has evolved through the vegetable. It has evolved through the animal. It has evolved through the human. And now we must step into the fifth kingdom, the spiritual kingdom, which is the kingdom of pure consciousness. It is the kingdom of law, inevitably operating through the consciousness that we provide to it, creating the circumstances of our lives. Now the reason I said that we're like the children on the playground is sometimes when we first become aware, we're first studying metaphysics, and we first become aware of the fact that there's this power in the universe that responds to me according to my belief, We get afraid, just like the child on the playground. We get afraid. We want to run. We want to hide. Oh my God. Oh my goodness. You know, I created this mess. Oh my goodness. Something within me believed something that created this mess. And since I'm the one creating the mess is going to be with me forever and ever and ever. And I just want to turn away from it. I just want to look in a different direction and pretend that it's not there. I call that metaphysical guilt, you know. And we may do that for a while, but nothing changes. You see, nothing changes. And at some point we have to stop and say, well, wait a second. If I created this mess, I can create something different. I can create something better. And this is when we were in class, I used to tell the students, you know, think of the biggest mess you ever created in your life and celebrate it. Because if you're powerful enough to create that, think of what you can do if you're paying attention. Because you created all of that without even knowing what you were doing. Now you have conscious awareness. So we come to a point in our spiritual evolution where we recognize that the things that worked at the level of the animal kingdom or the human kingdom, the things that got us this far are things that are keeping us stuck. And it is time to let some of those go. It is time to start acting like the spiritual beings that we have finally become aware of, that we are. We have finally become aware that we are. So we have all of these different beliefs that we have put away in cubby holes in our mind. We have formed opinions about all kinds of things that may or may not be true, and we believe them to be true. And there's a power operating through our belief that then makes them true for us, makes them true for us. We expect the worst in people, we get the worst from people. We have our mental atmosphere that we carry around with us wherever we go. Life responds to us exactly according to our belief. So now we have to say, well, who can change my thoughts? Who can change my thoughts for me? Who can change what I believe for me? And it comes down to the fact that no one can do it for us. No one. We are the only thinkers in our universe, Dr. Holmes tells us. So if it's going to be, it's up to me. I have to take responsibility. I am already being held accountable. And by that I mean that everything that I am experiencing in my life is the outpicturing of my thoughts, so I have accountability. Now I must exercise my responsibility. I must reach my hand up above my head and take control of my shadow self. I must learn to control my mental atmosphere. And at first this seems like a daunting task, you know. We think, well, wait a second. What are you talking about, Jim? You know, I don't even know what I believe. There's things in there that I believe that are down so deep that I can't access them with my conscious mind, and you're telling me I have to change them. Excuse me. So we're not talking about psychoanalysis. We're not talking about going in there and spending years and years and years of trying to figure out how did these thoughts get here in the first place? How did these beliefs form in the first place, you know? Was there some traumatic event that happened when I was very young and then I formed this opinion and now it's stuck in there? And all of that may be true from a psychological level. But what I'm saying is we don't have to go in there and try to dig these things up and look at them so that we can throw them away. It's a cancel and replace operation. It's a cancel and replace. So you remember the story I told you about Emmett Fox, who spoke in New York City at the Divine Science Church, which, by the way, Emmett Fox was the pastor of the Divine Science Church after Ernest Holmes' brother Fenwick was the pastor at the Divine Science Church of New York City. But Emmett Fox started talking about the Statue of Liberty, and everybody in New York knows the Statue of Liberty. Everybody in New York has seen the Statue of Liberty. Many of us looked right out the windows of our office buildings, and it was there every day that we went to work. If it wasn't foggy, we could look out, and there she was, Lady Liberty. If you drove across the bridge, and before the bridge, if you took the ferry across to Staten Island, you saw the Statue of Liberty. So Emmett Fox started describing the Statue of Liberty in great detail about how green the metal was, you know, from the salt air interacting with the copper, about the crown on her head and little spikes on the crown, and the torch in her hand, and you know, and the scroll that she was holding in her arms. And he went into great detail about the Statue of Liberty. And he said to his congregation, he said, "Now, do you have that picture in your head?" And they, "Oh yes, they got it." He said, "Okay, now stop thinking about that." And he started talking about, you know, a little bit longer in his sermon, and he says, "Has everybody stopped thinking about the Statue of Liberty?" And of course they hadn't. They still had this picture of the Statue of Liberty in your head. You can't just say stop thinking about that. You know, the old riddle about the king who was going to give somebody a fortune if they could spend a night in the palace and not think of a white elephant. Well, of course, no one could do it, because the more you try not to think of a white elephant, the more you're going to think of the white elephant. The more you try not to think about the Statue of Liberty, the more you think about the Statue of Liberty. So Emmett Fox then changed the subject, and he started telling people about the time he was in Paris and he visited the Eiffel Tower, and he went into great detail describing the Eiffel Tower and how the metal beams were put together and how the elevators operated from water being poured in as ballast and emptied out as ballast, and you know, the view of the city of Paris and the river when you get up to the observation deck. And he went on and on and on about the Eiffel Tower, and he stopped and he said, "Now, how many people are thinking about the Statue of Liberty?" And no one was thinking about the Statue of Liberty. They were all thinking about the Eiffel Tower. And this is a very simple example. You don't have to worry about going into your consciousness and for example, saying, now, you know, how do I find where I'm thinking about the Statue of Liberty, and go in, I dig it up, and how do I remove it? You don't do that. Don't waste your time trying to do that. You just simply keep pouring in the ideas of the things, the mental equivalents of what you want. Another example comes from Dr. Holmes. I believe it's from Dr. Holmes. It might also be Emmett Fox, I don't know. But if you, I think it's Dr. Holmes. If you think of a glass of water, if you take a glass of water, clear glass so you can see through it, and you take some ink from an inkwell, those of you who remember inkwells, and you pour a little bit of ink, just a few drops of ink into that water. Now what happens is that ink kind of dissolves and diffuses, and it goes all through that water. So there's not just like a little drop of ink laying at the bottom of the glass, but the whole glass kind of turns a blue tint if you're using blue ink, or a black tint if you're using black ink. And you get kind of a shade of gray in there. And if someone said to you, now I want you to go in here and I want you to remove the ink from that water, you know, you couldn't do it. How would you do it? You couldn't go in there and stick your hand in there and just find the molecules of ink and pull them out. But if you put that glass of water under the tap and you slowly let the tap water run in there, over time, as the clear water goes in there, it flushes out. It flushes out, excuse me, the inky water, and over time the water in the glass is clear again. So I want you to think of that image, because what we are doing is we are building consciousness. One of the most important things that we can remember is that the positive idea, the idea that is rooted in truth, it has the ability to negate the old erroneous ideas. If I am working with conscious, deliberate thoughts of love and of peace and of harmony, those ideas within me that are not in tune with love and peace and harmony get flushed out, like the clear water flushes out the inky water. Now, an experiment that you can do for yourself, remember I talked a couple weeks ago about the little pamphlet Lori and I put out on your metaphysical toolbox, and one of those techniques that we had in there was the use of affirmations, and I'm sure you're all familiar with affirmations. But this technique, I learned it in an article in the Science of Mind magazine many years ago in the late 80s. The technique is different. You just don't repeat things. You're just not repeating things. You start with a blank piece of paper and you write across the top what the affirmation is. And you say it out loud. Of course, you do this when you can be in a place where you can do it. You read your affirmation out loud and then you write down the first thing that comes across your mind. You don't analyze it, you don't judge it, you don't weigh it, just write it down. And then you read it again, you read the affirmation again, and you write down whatever comes. You read it again, you write down whatever comes. You keep doing this, you keep doing this, and you keep doing this until nothing new comes, you know. And even what I do when I'm using it is sometimes I say, nothing came to me. I write down, nothing came to me, and I read it again, nothing came to me, and I read it again. Sometimes I'll write a half a page and nothing came to me, and then all of a sudden something new comes to me again, kind of like I move through a block. But if you go back and you read the responses to your affirmation, what you typically find is somewhere in your response is something that makes absolutely no intellectual sense. But somewhere in your consciousness, those things were linked together. So the example that I used in the booklet and I've used many times in classes and in talks is when I first discovered this technique, I got an affirmation. I believe it was from Louise Hay, and it was something like, I am the prosperous child of an abundant universe, or something along those lines. And we were going somewhere in the car, Lori was driving, and I was doing this technique. And when I went back and I read my responses, somewhere in the middle of the page, or maybe even in the middle of the second page of my responses, what I had written down was, "O Lord, I am not worthy to receive you." Now that just seemed to me to be a very, very odd response to the affirmation, I am a prosperous child of an abundant universe. But somewhere in my consciousness, this idea of worthiness was linked to prosperity. "O Lord, I am not worthy to receive you." And of course, for those of you who grew up Catholic, that was something that we said during the Mass, every Mass. And as an altar boy, I used to say that response on behalf of the congregation. "O Lord, I am not worthy to receive you. Say but thy word, and my soul shall be healed." Now, I'm sure that you know, the intention of the Mass had nothing to do to tie that with prosperity, but my consciousness did. My consciousness tied those things together. And the point here is that when we are putting the new ideas into our consciousness, the old ideas get shaken loose. The old ideas come bubbling up and they get shaking loose. And this is something that teachers would call chemicalization. Sometimes you're doing your treatment work and you're trying to change your consciousness deliberately, and the law is working upon the direction you gave it in treatment, and all of a sudden things start to seem really crazy in your life. You're treating for perfect health, you get sicker. You're treating for prosperity and you get fired. You know, all these kinds of things. Chemicalization. The old ideas are putting up a fuss. They don't want to go. And what I would tell my students is to sit back and say, good, good. We've got movement. We've got change. It looks scary, but this too shall pass. Reach up with your hand and grab your mental atmosphere. Now the reason for that, the reason we get afraid is something I said at the very beginning. Okay? Once our emotions get involved, the intellect's ability to reason us out of our fear becomes greatly diminished. And that part of us that doesn't want to change puts up a fuss and causes us to become afraid, to get us to go back to the way we were. It does not want to change. It believes it is right. It believes that if it changes, we will die. And we have to take control. We have to bless it and thank it for getting us this far. But now it is time for us to step into the fifth kingdom, the spiritual kingdom, and to exercise dominion over our thoughts. Particularly in the West, we have spent generations upon generations and thousands of years trying to exercise dominion over nature, using the soil and the animal and the air and the water for our own purposes. What we have not done is the most important thing that we can do, which is to learn how to exercise dominion over our consciousness. Excuse me again. So we have the ability to become self-aware, and we have to use it. No one can do it for us. We have to use it. Simple meditation, counting from 1 to 5 as we breathe in, allows us to become an observer of our thoughts. Because here I am trying to sit and inhale, count 1, exhale, inhale, count 2, exhale, 1 to 5 over and over. That's all I'm trying to do, is count from 1 to 5 over and over. And then I've got all of this junk floating across my consciousness, all of these ideas that keep intruding, all of these things that keep trying to distract me from the very simple task of just counting from 1 to 5 over and over. So then we start to become aware of how these thoughts come and how these thoughts go. And we also become aware of the fact that we do not have to engage them. I am not that thought. In fact, that thought may not even be my thought. Where did that thought come from? Where does that thought go? For whom does the thought arise? Who is the one observing the thought? These are all kind of questions that you would ask yourself over time in analytical meditation, another form of meditation. So meditation helps us to become aware of the process. And once we become aware that we are not victims. See, our society has told us that to worry is good. See, worrying is good. You kind of project your consciousness out to the future. You anticipate all the things that could go wrong, and you make plans to defend against those. Right? Society kind of values that. And at one point, as I say, at one point in our evolution, that was good. That was good that we could do that. But we don't need to do that nearly as much as we do it anymore. We don't need to worry about all the things that we're worrying about anymore. They're never going to happen. How many of the things that you've ever worried about ever came to pass anyway? Right? Now, in some cases, you headed them off. In other cases, you were just needlessly worrying. Wouldn't it be more productive to create the mental equivalent of what you want to have happen, rather than to spend your time worrying about what you don't want to have happen? So now, as you start to recognize yourself as a spiritual being living in the fifth kingdom, having dominion of your thoughts, if you find yourself starting to worry, stop right there and say, instead of thinking about what I don't want to have happen, what do I want to have happen? What do I want to have happen? Maybe you're thinking about going on a trip and you think, well, I could get a flat tire, or I could run out of gas, or the car could break down, or the traffic could be congested. You start to think of everything that could possibly go wrong. We've got to stop ourselves and say, well, what do I want to have happen? I want to have a peaceful, safe trip. That's what I want to have happen. Can you create the mental equivalent of a peaceful, safe trip? Can you use an affirmation such as divine love goes ahead of me, making the crooked way straight? Can we start to appreciate, all of the great things that are coming into play for our trip? Think of all of the engineering and construction and money that went into the highways, and there's gas stations every couple miles, and if something happens, there's your roadside service to call. There's all of these great things to think about. So put your mind on the things you want and keep it off of the things you don't want. So our society tells us there's value in worrying. And what I'm saying is that if you start to worry, immediately switch gears to think about what you want. Excuse me. Let me get a drink of water. And not what about you don't want. And the second, and perhaps the more important thing is that our society tells us that we're victims of our thoughts. You see this all the time where people say, well, I didn't have any choice but to react the way I did because of what this person said about me. This person said something and I got mad and I punched him in the nose. But I couldn't help myself. I had to do it. We have to fight back when somebody calls us a name. And that's not true. See, that's not true. We always have a choice. We always have a choice. In Buddhism, they teach the adherents, there's kind of like a pause. We hear something, there's a pause, and then there's a reaction. And if we learn how to be in that pause and stay in that pause, we don't have to react. I'm not saying we wouldn't do anything, but what we do with deliberate intention, not out of a feeling of victimhood. I didn't have any choice but to punch them in the nose. They called me a name. Again, meditation teaches us, oh look, that person called me a name. That's all that happened, right? That's all that happened. All the rest of it, the way that we react and respond, that's pre-programmed into our consciousness, our old consciousness, from our old way of thinking and our old way of believing, because that's the pattern that we learned. And now we want to break out of that. You are the only thinker in your universe. You and you alone. Nobody can change your thoughts for you. Nobody can change your consciousness for you. But your primary responsibility in life is to take dominion of your consciousness, to learn that you are not a victim of your thoughts, to learn that you can choose, you can always choose, you always have a choice of how to react and respond. Always. You just have to learn how to exercise it. So if you find yourself starting to say, well, I didn't have any choice but to get angry because of what that person did to me, we do have a choice. We do have a choice. We just have to learn. We have to take responsibility to learn how to exercise that choice. So as we do this, see, and Dr. Holmes says, don't expect it to happen overnight. Think of it as that glass of water. Now this is kind of a dichotomy because it can happen overnight. If you really believed it could happen overnight. The only thing that's stopping it from happening overnight is the natural unfoldment. But think of it more as a project where every day it's consciousness unfolding. Every day you are moving the yardsticks a little bit further. Every day you are moving more and more and more into your true dominion, into the fifth kingdom, as Troward calls us, into the spiritual dominion where you are the deliberate thinker, the deliberate chooser in your life. You are constantly putting into your consciousness, deliberately and consciously putting into your consciousness the mental equivalent of what you want to have happen. What you're doing is you are changing that shadow, that mental shadow. You are changing that shadow so that what follows you from now on is good, is good. You're the only thinker in your life. You have the ability to choose, you have the responsibility to choose, and the law makes you accountable for what you choose. I invite you this year to make this the year that you get up every morning and you say, today I choose. And you declare the kind of day that you will have. And during the day you remind yourself of that. And if something comes up and you start to find yourself being pulled away from it, getting sucked into the drama, you bring yourself back and say, that's not the experience I want to have. Here's the experience I want to have. Think of your shadow as your partner, following you around to help you. And what you are doing, your shadow being your mental atmosphere, is you are constantly impressing upon it the images of that which you wish to experience. The law will do the rest, and so it is. Alrighty then. I'm going to do the closing treatment. Reverend Lori didn't have time to pick one out for us this morning. So I will do a closing treatment. And let's come together and let's recognize that there's one life that we call God. It is decisive, it is clear, it knows what it knows what it wishes to have, and something that we call the law acts upon that command and makes it so. In the beginning was the chaos, and God said, let there be, and there was. That's the way Genesis explains this. It is done unto you according to your belief is the way the New Testament explains it. That one perfect life that we call spirit has created each and every one of us out of itself as a unique, individualized starting place of new experiences. Divine love experiences life uniquely in you, in me. It has given us the ability to choose. It has given us the accountability to experience the results of what we believe, whether we choose to believe consciously or not. So today we accept our responsibility to become conscious co-creators of our lives. Today we accept the responsibility to constantly pour into our consciousness the ideas that are the mental equivalent of that which we would experience, and let them do their work, dissolving, shaking up, and cutting loose every and any idea to the contrary. Today, we declare our willingness to release and let go of every and any belief in consciousness, whether it be at a level of conscious awareness or below our level of conscious awareness. We release and we let go of every and any idea that is keeping us from experiencing the fullness of our spiritual nature. We are grateful to know that there's a power in the universe that responds to us according to our belief, and we can work with that power to change our beliefs. So we release this treatment to that power right now, knowing that it is already shaking loose the old, obsolete ideas. That it is now leading and guiding us to infuse ourselves with new ideas. Ideas of love and of peace and of prosperity and of kindness. And we release this treatment to that law so certain it is done that we say together, and so it is.